Welcome to the Deep Dive, your shortcut to becoming well-informed. We take a curated stack of sources and really pull out the crucial insights you need.
And today we're digging into something super relevant: effective communication.
Exactly. Our main source is Jefferson Fisher's audiobook, The Next Conversation, Argue Less, Talk More. We've got parts of the transcript here.
Yeah, and our goal really is to unpack Fisher's core ideas, give you some practical, actionable takeaways, things you can actually use.
Right, to improve your own conversations. And we want to emphasize the practical side, how to connect better, especially when disagreements pop up.
Which they always do, right? So we're focusing today on those strategies for, navigating everyday friction and building stronger relationships. It's about more mindful talk.
It really is. And Fisher has this kind of surprising idea that winning arguments, maybe not the goal.
It's fascinating. He argues it's more about genuine understanding, connection, less about just, dominating the chat.
Yeah, prioritizing that connection over winning. That's what we're going to unpack. How do we actually do that? How do we get beyond just surface stuff?
Okay, so where do we start? Fisher's first big idea.
Let's dive in with what he calls the illusion of the surface.
Yes. This is really foundational. His basic point is, the person you see isn't the person you're talking to. It sounds simple, but it's deep.
He uses that river analogy, right? The surface might look one way,
but underneath, there's this whole current. Their real feelings, what they've been through, their worries, it's all flowing underneath.
It's such a good reminder, isn't it? Because we react to the surface. He gives those examples like the agitated coworker.
Yeah, maybe they barely slept. Or the cashier who seems scattered. Maybe they're drowning in financial stress.
Or your spouse seems tense and could just be a terrible day at work. There's usually more going on than what we see first.
Exactly. And he really makes this concrete with that story about Bobby LaPrade.
Oh yeah, the deposition story. That one really sticks with you. Fisher walks in, and this guy, Bobby LaPrade, he sounds pretty intimidating.
Physically imposing, yeah. And immediately hostile. Just lays into him like, lawyers are the worst thing to happen to America. Whoa.
Intense beginning. And Fisher admits, his first reaction was totally defensive, like, hey now.
Which is natural. But then something shifts. He gets curious. He starts wondering, okay, what's the other conversation happening inside this guy?
Right. Instead of just arguing back, he asks this really direct, almost vulnerable question.
He asks Bobby LaPrade about his biggest personal struggle that year. Just flat out asks.
And it completely changes the energy, doesn't it?
Totally pivots. Suddenly the anger just dissolves. Bobby starts talking about his mom. She's in assisted living. There's all this confusing paperwork.
And he just feels helpless. This tough guy, he actually gets emotional. Tears up even. Confesses how worried he is.
It's this incredible breakthrough. Fisher realizes, oh, I'm not talking to some angry witness stereotype. I'm talking to a son who's scared for his mom.
And the outcome is amazing. Bobby opens up. Fisher actually helps him, connects him with an elder law attorney.
And the deposition ends with a bear hug from this guy who started out so hostile.
It just perfectly illustrates that core message, doesn't it? That maybe, just maybe, in our own lives, when someone seems angry or difficult,
there's often something else going on underneath. It really encourages you, the listener, to pause and consider that hidden narrative.
So, thinking about that, what does that mean for us day to day? How do we get curious instead of defensive, especially when things move fast?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it leads right into Fisher's next point. Why this drive to win arguments is often counterproductive. Why winning is losing.
Right. We're so conditioned to want to win, to be right. But Fisher argues against it.
He makes some really strong points, like, okay, you might win the argument technically, but you could still be totally wrong about the facts.
Good point.
Even if you are right and you win, what's the cost? Often you lose trust. You damage the relationship. Respect erodes.
So you win the battle, lose the war, kind of.
Exactly. And the underlying problem, it probably hasn't gone anywhere. Might even be worse now, just simmering below the surface.
You contrast that with the ancient Greeks, right? Their whole goal for dialogue was different.
Yeah, it was about understanding each other, getting closer to the truth together. Not about one person defeating the other. It's a very different mindset.
And it's worth remembering, like Fisher points out, that we all come to conflict differently based on our upbringing.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Some people grew up where arguing was just how you communicated. Others learned to avoid disagreement at all costs.
And those backgrounds really shape how we handle things now, how comfortable we are with friction.
So it prompts a question for you listening. How do you usually approach disagreements? Are you aiming to win or aiming to understand?
Fisher really pushes for that shift. See arguments not as fights, but as chances. Opportunities to learn more about the other person.
Yeah, what are the dangers if we get too caught up in proving we're right? We miss so much.
Which brings us nicely to this idea of your next conversation, the follow-up.
Right. Fisher suggests that sometimes the conversation after the initial one, especially if the first one was tough, is actually more important.
Why is that? What happens in that next conversation?
Well, often those initial defenses, that knee-jerk reactivity, it starts to fade a bit. People have had time to process.
Okay. So there's more potential for genuine connection, maybe getting closer to the real issue.
Exactly. More potential for healing, for finding common ground, for actually understanding what happened.
But he also warns us, doesn't he, about playing conversations out in our heads beforehand.
Oh yeah, we rehearse these perfect arguments in the shower, right? But real interactions, they rarely go according to script.
So true. So instead of trying to perfectly script it, what should our goal be?
Fisher says focus on learning, have something to learn, not something to prove. That simple shift changes everything. Have a learning goal for the chat.
Okay, a learning goal. I like that. And he talks about these 3 cuts that block connection. Lack of awareness.
Lack of awareness of your own stuff, your triggers. Then lack of understanding of where the other person is coming from.
And the third cut.
Lack of self-assurance, which often leads to communicating indirectly, kind of beating around the bush because you're afraid of the reaction.
Let's dig into that first one, understanding our own triggers. That seems crucial.
Totally. Fisher uses these terms, ignition and cooling, like starting a fire and letting it die down.
Ignition, that's when you feel threatened, right? Emotions flare up.
Yeah, that's the danger zone. You feel attacked, maybe misunderstood, and boom, you say things you later regret. Your heart pounds, you get tunnel vision.
We've all been there. And cooling.
Cooling is when that heat starts to dissipate. Clarity returns. You can think more rationally again, see the bigger picture.
Okay, so understanding what causes that ignition, our triggers, is key. What kind of triggers does he identify?
He groups them into 3 main buckets. First, social evaluation triggers. Basically, the fear of being judged negatively by others.
Like worrying you'll seem incompetent or foolish if you speak up.
Exactly. Or arrogant, maybe. The second type, personal identity threats. These are challenges to things core to who you are.
Like what?
Challenges to your competence, your autonomy, feeling controlled, your sense of purpose, or even your deeply held values. Someone questions those and bam, ignition.
Okay, and the third type?
Loss triggers. The fear of losing something important. Could be losing face, losing a relationship, losing control, losing resources.
He gives examples, right? Like fearing you'll look dumb if you ask a question that's social evaluation.
Right, or if someone dismisses your expertise that hits your competence, an identity threat.
Or maybe holding back an opinion because you're afraid it'll upset someone close to you, a fear of loss, losing that connection.
Precisely. And just knowing these categories, recognizing your own patterns and maybe spotting them in others, that gives you a huge advantage.
How so?
Because when you feel that heat rising, you can recognize, okay, this is hitting my need for competence trigger. And instead of just reacting,
you can choose a different response, a cooling action maybe. Something to de-escalate instead of pouring gasoline on the fire.
Exactly. It's about regaining control.
Okay, so we're more aware of our triggers. What tools does Fisher give us for staying in control in that heated moment?
He offers 3 really immediate, practical tools. First, your first word is your breath.
Okay.
That's second. Your first thought is a quick scan. And third, your first conversation is small talk, but not the usual kind.
All right, let's break those down. Your first word is your breath. What does he mean? He has that specific technique, right?
Yeah, the conversational breath is pretty specific. Inhale through your nose for 2 seconds.
Okay.
Then a quick little extra inhale through the nose, just 1 second. And then a long, slow exhale through your nose for 6 seconds. And repeat. 2
ins, 1 quick in, 6 out, all through the nose. Why that pattern?
Well, first, nasal breathing itself is generally slower, deeper. And that long exhale, that's the key part. It activates the parasympathetic nervous system, your body's rest and digest system.
The calming system. Not the fight or flight one.
Exactly. It actively reduces stress. He even mentions the Stanford study on physiological size, the double inhale, long exhale being super effective for calming down fast.
And he connects it to things like Navy SEAL tactical breathing too. That rhythmic focus really grounds you.
It really does. It brings conscious control back when your body's starting to freak out. Okay, second tool. Your first thought is a quick scan.
This sounds like mindfulness, checking in.
Totally. It's a quick 4-step thing. 1, take that breath we just talked about.
Got it.
2, briefly close your eyes just for a second. 3, scan your body. Where's the tension? Shoulders, jaw, gut.
Noticing the physical signs.
Right. And 4, label the emotion you feel connected to that tension. Is it frustration, anger, fear, anxiety?
Just putting a name on it, does that help?
Hugely. Fisher suggests even saying it internally, like I can tell. So I can tell I'm getting irritated, or I can tell I'm feeling defensive.
Why does verbalizing it even internally make a difference?
It creates a little bit of distance. You're observing the feeling instead of just being the feeling. It helps you regulate.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Breath, scan, label. And the third tool, your first conversation is small talk.
You said not the usual kind.
Right. This isn't about the weather. This is internal small talk. Quick mental prompts you give yourself to guide your response.
It's like a little self-coaching memo.
Kind of. But it needs to align with your goals for the conversation and your values. So if you need to stand your ground, the internal talk might be stand firm.
Or if you really need to understand the other person.
Maybe it's seek to understand or listen first. He suggests starting with verbs stand, seek, listen to create an active mindset.
And keep it short and personal. Just a quick mental reset.
Exactly. A way to get intentional before you open your mouth.
These are super practical.
Yeah.
Breath, scan, internal small talk. Now, what about something that feels opposite? Silence.
Yeah.
Using pauses strategically. Yeah, this is a big one for Fisher. He says, silence is wisdom in waiting, not a sign of incompetence. We often feel pressured to fill silence, right?
Totally. It can feel awkward, like you don't know what to say.
But Fisher argues that pause is powerful. It gives you time to think, to reflect on what was just said, maybe reconsider your first reaction.
Time to cool down, maybe, using those other tools.
That's absolutely. And it also lets you observe, watch the other person, see their reaction, take in the whole dynamic of the room or the conversation.
He tells that story about the witness, right? The aggressive one.
Yeah, where Fisher just stayed silent after a hostile outburst. And the silence became this kind of mirror. The witness got uncomfortable and ended up blurting out crucial information just to fill the void.
Wow. So silence can actually draw information out.
It can. And Fisher gives some guidelines on length, like short pauses, maybe 1 to 4 seconds, can show you're considering, show resoluteness.
Yep, right.
Longer pauses, 5 to 10 seconds, signal deeper reflection. They can also make the other person lean in, anticipate what you'll say next.
It's about being intentional with the quiet, not just reactive with words. Shifting gears a bit, let's talk about sounding confident. That assertive voice he mentions.
Right. And he's clear, confidence isn't a switch you flip. It's something that grows from doing, from acting assertively.
So how do we cultivate that? He has those 7 lessons, right?
Yeah, 7 practical lessons for developing that assertive voice. Lesson 1, every word matters.
Meaning, be precise with language.
Exactly. Your word choice hugely impacts how assertive you sound. He gives examples like saying, I think maybe we could possibly, versus I recommend we. Big difference.
Definitely sounds more confident. Okay, lesson 2.
Prove it to yourself. This is about saying what you're going to do out loud, present tense, and then actually doing it.
Yeah.
Builds credibility, both with others and yourself.
Like saying, I am sending the email now, instead of just, I'll send it later.
Sort of, yeah. Or in an email, I'm attaching the file, versus please see attached. It's active, it shows follow through. Helps enforce boundaries too.
Okay. Lesson 3.
State your needs. Get comfortable using I need statements. And stop over apologizing.
Oh, that's a big one for many people. Saying sorry for things that aren't their fault.
Right. Fisher suggests replacing those unnecessary sorries with maybe a thank you or just silence. It's often more powerful.
Good tip. Lesson 4.
Speak when it matters. Don't feel like you have to jump into every single part of a conversation or respond to every comment, especially pointless or unhelpful ones.
Choose your moments. Quality over quantity.
Exactly. Which leads to lesson 5. Say less.
Be concise.
Yeah. It's like supply and demand. Fewer words often have more impact, command more attention. Rambling, over-explaining. It often signals a lack of confidence.
Makes sense. Lesson 6.
Remove filler words. Those ums, likes, yos. They make you sound hesitant.
Replace them with pauses instead.
Yes. Deliberate silence sounds way more intentional and confident than filling the space with fillers.
Okay. And the last one, lesson 7.
Never undersell. Avoid phrases that devalue yourself or your contribution. Things like, I hate to bother you, but, or This might be dumb, but
Because that lowers the listener's expectations right from the start.
totally. And it chips away at your own feeling of confidence too. Project value through your language.
So those 7 lessons, word choice, follow through, stating needs, timing, brevity, no fillers, no underselling, build that assertive voice. Powerful stuff. Now, what about applying this when dealing with difficult people?
Yeah, he tackles that head on and acknowledges that often the most difficult conflicts are with people we're closest to, families, partners.
Emotions run higher there. He shares that story about the sisters in a legal fight.
Right, just showing how stubborn and hurtful things can get. But then he offers very specific tactics for handling common difficult behaviors.
Like what? Give us some examples.
Okay, so dealing with bad apologies, those non-apologies, he says don't just accept them. Clarify what a real apology would look like.
Hold them accountable, gently but firmly.
Exactly. What about interruptions? Someone constantly talking over you.
Ugh, yes. What's the advice there?
He suggests something direct but polite like, name, I can't actually hear you when you interrupt me. I will listen when I'm finished speaking.
Clear, calm, sets a boundary. Nice. What about people who just seem to want to argue, those bids for disagreement?
Don't take the bait. Use phrases that buy you time, delay your answer, rather than jumping right into the fight.
Like, let me think about that, or that's an interesting perspective.
Exactly. And he offers filters for deciding if a disagreement is even worth having. Like, is this really worth it? And do we have to agree on this right now?
Good sanity checks. And if you do need to disagree,
Use your vantage point. Instead of a blunt, I disagree, which can feel confrontational, try phrases like, I see things differently, or I tend to lean the opposite way on this, or I take another approach.
softer, less direct opposition, but still clear.
Right. It acknowledges their view while stating yours. It's about de-escalating while still being assertive.
These are really useful tools for those tricky moments. And speaking of tricky, that leads us to setting boundaries, which is often really hard.
Oh, absolutely. Saying no, protecting your time and energy.
Yeah.
It's tough but essential. Fisher says it's how you reclaim your power.
And he emphasizes that boundaries aren't just words, right? They're defined by your actions, what you consistently allow or don't allow.
Precisely. Your choices define your boundaries. And he has this interesting idea. Create an operator's manual for yourself.
An operator's manual, like for a machine.
Kind of. It's a list maybe even written down just for you, outlining how others should interact with you, what you will and won't accept in communication.
Like, I will not participate in gossip, or I need advance notice for requests, or I don't respond to yelling.
Exactly. Clear statements about your limits. And then the crucial part is enforcing them using those clear I statements we talked about.
And grounding these boundaries in your values helps make them stick, right? Knowing why a boundary is important to you.
Absolutely. If you value respect, your boundary might be about not tolerating disrespectful language. And he makes a key point. If your boundary makes someone else uncomfortable.
That doesn't automatically mean your boundary is wrong.
Right. It might just mean the boundary is working. It's pushing back against something that wasn't okay for you.
Okay, so boundaries are key. Let's shift to proactively building connection now. How can we say it to connect? He talks about frames.
Yes, framing the conversation. Think of it like putting a frame around a picture. It defines the focus. He uses that funny Foot Locker story.
Right, being overwhelmed by too many shoe choices. How does that relate to conversations?
Well, an unframed conversation can feel like that Foot Locker wall, too many potential directions. Easy to get lost or off topic. Framing provides structure and clarity.
So it's about setting the stage up front, minimizing confusion.
Exactly. He says there are 3 steps. 1, set the direction, clearly state what you want to talk about.
Okay.
2, call your shot, explain the desired outcome. What do you hope to achieve with this conversation?
Be clear about the goal.
And 3, get their commitment. Make sure they're on board with having this conversation right now. Simple phrases like, is now a good time to talk about X? Or, my goal here is to understand Y.
So everyone knows what the conversation is about and what it's not about.
Precisely. It defines what's inside the frame and what's outside. This makes listening easier too, because you know what to focus on.
And he stresses one frame, one issue per conversation, right? Don't try to tackle everything at once.
Yes. That avoids those messy circular arguments where you jump from topic to topic. He even gives phrases to gently pull a conversation back if it starts to drift out of frame.
Super useful for keeping things productive. Now, what about the flip side of connection defensiveness? That definitely breaks connection.
Big time. Fisher says getting defensive is a sure sign you're entering that ignition phase. You feel attacked, and you shut down connection to protect yourself.
He gives examples, like maybe your spouse tries to open up about something, and you immediately jump to defending your actions instead of just listening.
Or you get a short, maybe slightly abrupt text message, and you immediately assume the worst and fire back defensively.
Taking things personally, and he warns that can become a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Confirmation bias.
Yeah. If you expect people to attack you, you'll interpret their words defensively, react defensively, and likely provoke the negative reaction you were afraid of in the first place.
So how do we diffuse defensiveness in ourselves or others?
Key strategies. Start sentences with I, not you. Avoid starting questions with why, because it often sounds accusatory. Why did you do that?
What should we ask instead of why?
Maybe, what led to that decision? Or, can you help me understand your thinking there? More open, less pointed. And crucially, acknowledge the other person's perspective first, before you give yours.
Like, okay, I hear that you're feeling frustrated about X from my perspective.
Exactly. That validation can lower their defenses significantly.
Makes sense. Okay, finally, let's touch on those really difficult conversations, the big ones.
Yeah, and Fisher says how you handle these really shows your character. They're tough.
What makes them so challenging, according to him?
Often it's because we go in without a clear plan. We don't know where we're going or how to get there. And our approach is everything.
He warns against being too hot, like aggressive, or too soft, like passive, right?
Exactly, or too passive-aggressive. Finding that assertive middle ground is key. He offers this blueprint for building connection, specifically for these tough talks.
Assuming you've already worked on the emotional control, the assertive voice we discussed earlier.
Right. So if someone comes to you with a difficult conversation, the first step is creating safety. Saying things like, I'm really glad you came to me with this.
Or thank you for telling me this. Showing you're open, not immediately shutting down.
Crucially, avoid turning the spotlight onto yourself immediately. Like, don't say, well, I feel attacked. Keep the focus on them initially.
Then ask open-ended questions to understand. How are you feeling about this? What's your biggest concern here?
Yes. Really seek to understand their world first and dedicate real focus time. No distractions. Put the phone away.
And one final key piece of advice for initiating difficult conversations.
Lead with your conclusion. State the main point, the bottom line, right up front. Don't bury the lead. It provides clarity, even if the message is tough.
Wow. Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive into the next conversation, it's clear effective communication is way more than just talking.
So much more. It's really about understanding the person behind the words, right? Prioritizing that connection, even when it's hard, not just trying to score points.
And using these practical tools, the breath work, the quick scan, strategic silence, framing that assertive but not aggressive voice.
Yeah, the value here is how actionable Fisher's advice is. These aren't just abstract ideas. They're techniques you can actually try out.
And that's really our invitation to you listening. Pick one thing, maybe the breathing, maybe trying an I statement instead of a you statement, maybe pausing before you react.
Just try one or two things in your next conversation. See what happens. Notice the difference it makes, maybe even just internally for you.
Which leads us to that final thought to chew on. What if you really shifted your focus, moved away from needing to be right, and leaned into trying to understand deeply?
How could that fundamentally change your relationships, your approach to conflict? What might actually become possible if connection was consistently your primary goal?
Something to think about. This deep dive is really just scratching the surface of Fisher's work, but hopefully it gives you a solid foundation.
Definitely food for thought, and hopefully some useful tools for your own next conversation.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep connecting,